Carolina and broadcasting worldwide, bringing you strategies and inspiration from leaders who've achieved outstanding results. It's time to compress decades of trying into days of execution and become the leader you were born to be. It's time for Moments Matter with Dave Sanderson.
Hey, good morning. Have you ever wondered what the top 1% of any industry or athlete or organization do to go from being seen as excellent in their respective industry to being seen as outstanding, what Tony Robbins calls that 1% difference? Well, why is this? That's what you'll be learning from people who've moved from being excellent to outstanding on Moments Matter with Dave Sanderson. They stand out. Hall of Famers, billionaires, people who've done extraordinary things, people who've overcome unbelievable odds, outstanding people, the top 1% in their world. Good morning. Welcome to Dave Sanderson and Moments Matter. One thing that Tony Robbins taught me and teaches all of his audiences is that success leaves clues. And if you want to accomplish anything in your life, put yourself around those people, and you too will learn the strategies on how to get what you want, because proximity is power. This is just about that. I'm going to give you access to people who've ascended to the top level of their industry. So you have the proximity to these leaders to learn those key insights that will compress to decades. It usually takes you to accomplish your goals in today's. And today, I am going to take the show on myself. I have been getting so many requests from people who've asked me to say, hey, Dave, we really want you to sort of go to the background. How did you get to be where you are? How did you start growing the way you start growing? So I want to take today's show and basically we're going to just talk about that. Some of the strategies that I used starting back in the mid 1980s to get me where I am today. And I've, like most people, I've grown and I've gone down. I've done that roller coaster. As you know, some people grow throughout their life and some people have to go to the peak of their mountain to go to the bottom of their valley before they can go back to the peak again. So today, I'm going to spend some time and share with you some of these strategies that I learned and I've employed. So hopefully you, as you start facing what I call your personal plane crash moments in life, you too will be able to not only grow from those experiences, but thrive and really get the outcomes you're looking for. So let me give you a little background. Back in the mid 1980s, my first job out of college was in restaurant management. Now, candidly, I had no background in restaurants whatsoever. You know, I got graduated from college in 1983, and the economy was pretty challenging at that point. It was pretty rough to try to find a job, and I was interviewing all over the country because my major in college was international business, and that was a pretty new major at that point. Candidly, I was in the first 4-year graduating class from James Madison University in that discipline, so it was pretty new terrain. So I interviewed with a lot of different organizations such as the CIA and international hotels and international companies, and I learned that I could really get through the first interview, but what I figured out is they really were looking for someone with some more international perspective and also could speak a second language fluently, which I could understand and comprehend, but I really couldn't articulate very well. So I had a hard time finding a job. And my dad, who was a great mentor to me, because I didn't really, he and I were going through those times with some teenagers and college kids to go with their parents. But he told me, he said, you have 30 days to find a job and you got to be out of the house. And so about the end of 30 days, I didn't have a job. So at the end of 30 days, he started looking for a job because he wanted me out of the house. That was his commitment, to make sure that I was going to be out in the working public. So he got me a job in restaurant management. Now, I knew nothing about restaurants, but I had a job making $15,600 a year. Back in 1983, that wasn't a lot of money, but at least you could pay your bills. So my first job was in that. So my third stop in restaurant management, I started in Richmond, Virginia, then went to Raleigh, North Carolina, then ended in Charlotte, North Carolina on my third stop. And I was the second assistant restaurant manager, which means I had the bad shifts. I was either working second or third shift pretty much every day in the restaurant and sometimes in the hotel, learning the entire perspective of hotel restaurant management. But when I was in the restaurant, I met a gentleman. And you've heard me talk and had the opportunity to hear me speak any place, or even on the show, I talk about my first mentor, Bill. And Bill was, came to the restaurant with his wife, Bonnie, and they would come in and, Bill would have his coffee and ice cream and we'd have a chat once in a while, but Bill started taking me under his wing. And Bill all of a sudden became my first mentor outside of my dad. it goes back to like what we learned in Rich Dad, Poor Dad, right? You have your dad who can teach you those life lessons, but then you have your rich dad who can teach you those lessons you need out in the world. And he sort of became my rich dad at that point in time. And he was teaching me these lessons that I didn't really understand, but he was dripping them out to me one by one so I could sort of learn and grow up, because one of the things I want to do is be a leader. And, to be a leader and you're that young, it's, you don't have a lot of credibility, you don't have a lot of experience, but he was teaching me how he became a leader in an industry. And if you know Bill's story, Bill, when I first met Bill, he wore a flannel shirt and drove a pickup truck. And candidly, I liked Bill, but didn't know much about him until I found out he owned 80 movie theaters in North and South Carolina. So he was one of those people who was a mover and shaker around Charlotte, North Carolina, but you would never know who he was. He was very unassuming. He was in his maybe early mid 60s at that point in time, and he was doing pretty well. And he started teaching me these life lessons, and to the point that he started with customer service, because I was in that industry and restaurant management. And he gave me a lesson about going out to his movie theaters and reporting back to him what he saw, and giving some feedback about customer service and teaching me lessons about customer service. It was probably the first part of the messaging he was giving me. But as I got to know Bill, I had Bill as a mentor probably about 13 to 14 years before his health started, deteriorating. He was getting close to end of life. And when the last time I saw Bill was in 1997. And when it was the same year my mom passed away. So it was a very emotional year for me. And Bill was up at that point, probably in his late 80s at that point in time, maybe approaching 90. And he gave me something. And he asked me, he said, he got this from his first mentor. Now, his first mentor, he got back in the 1920s when he was a young guy about my age, starting to grow. And he got his first mentor. His first mentor, I don't know what his name was, but he gave him these notes. And his notes were basically his 12 principles of how he became a success. And what Bill told me is his mentor got those notes from some people that he was working with back in the late 1800s and early 1900s, that year where the United States was going through that industrial age, where all these magnets were coming. So he was interacting with a lot of business people, learning these skill sets that made him a very successful person in the early 1900s, 1910s, and 1920s. And Bill trusted me with these notes. And what happened and how I refound these notes was that I'm a part of a mastermind group. And I believe one of the key strategies that Bill taught me was go into a group of alliance with people who could expand your mind and sort of be your board of directors. And I've done that. And part of being in this mastermind group that I'm involved with, we're supposed to read a book every month. But I wasn't reading a book. What I was doing is I was going back to the books that I read back in the late 1980s and early 1990s, when I started really my ascension in from restaurant management to sales. And I was reading these books, and I finally admitted to my group that I wasn't reading the books that I was supposed to, but I was reading these books that my mentors and all these people who I was associating with were teaching me and sharing with me. And I opened one of these books, and I found these notes that Bill gave me back in 1997, these 12 principles. And he got back in the 1920s, and they were gold. I mean, they were just gold. And I'm really honored to have these notes and learn these strategies and relearn these strategies and implement these strategies. But today I want to talk about one of those strategies that he taught me back in the 1980s and early 1990s. It was probably one of the first things he taught me. That I also heard and learned from people like Tom Hopkins and Jim Rohn and Dennis Waitley and Tony Robbins and all these other people, because they all have this basic foundation. And they all maybe say it differently or employ it differently, but they all have this basic foundation. And one of the first things Bill taught me was the power of goal setting. Now, everybody heard about goal setting, but these notes have some sort of different language in them. And then when I first heard them from Bill, but then I also heard them again from Jim Rohn when I went to my first and only Jim Rohn seminar. And also the notes that I took and some of the materials I got from Jim Rohn. It was called visual chain thinking. And, Bill used a different terminology around being able to sort of forecast, see the future before you could see the future, for the future is there for you. And Jim Rohn calls it visual chain thinking. And what is visual chain thinking? And that's what I really want to talk about today, some of these key strategies around how to really do this effectively for your business and going forward. So Visual chain thinking is the ability to not only go put yourself in a goal-setting environment, but also planning out the future so you can visually see each step, because a goal, you may have this goal of making, say, $1 million this year, but it's going to take many steps to get that done. And it's basically be able to visualize each of those steps so you can think about each of those steps as you start making progress towards that goal. And I started doing this back when I first got my first sales job. And my first sales job was selling copiers door to door in Charlotte, North Carolina. And it was a tough job. I never had been in sales. I wanted to be in sales, but I didn't know how to go about it. So I used this strategy of visual-based thinking, what Jim Rohn talks about, and also my mentor Bill shared with me about visualizing each step of the way so you can sort of see the outcome before the outcome is there. And I did this with my first sales job. Now, candidly, I was new to sales. I knew nothing about really how to go door to door in sales. And you got to remember, this is back in the late 1980s where we didn't have computers, we didn't have PCs. You know, we had the telephone, but a lot of things was like Tom Hopkins says, is belly to belly. So I had to figure out the strategy on how to go belly to belly, not knowing anything, but also knowing that I had an outcome of getting the sales that I needed to be able to only provide for my wife and our little family, but also, you know, making a living and hopefully building my little empire, my little fortune. So I used visual chain thinking. And so what I did is I laid out a strategy on how to become two things during my first sales job. First was I wanted to be the top demo person in our company. They had this prize, this Demorama prize, that basically you could be the top demo person only in your company, but also in the region and also nationally, and get rewarded and recognized. And, you know, a salesperson's mindset is, of course, you want to be recognized for what you do and sort of get that achievement going and getting that sort of that juice. So my first goal that I used visual chain thinking and the strategy that Bill taught, and then I heard from Jim Rohn, on being the Demorama champion. And I put this strategy together. And I candidly got to remember, I never demoed in my life. You know, I got out of school, I did presentations, but I never demoed in my life. So I put this strategy together on how to step by step become the Demorama champion the first year I was in sales. And I did this and I laid it out, and they had a timeline. You had about 6 months between the first demo and the doing a company-wide demo contest, and then a regional demo contest, and a national demo contest. So it's a 6-month process. So I backed this thing out to 6 months and said, what do I have to do every day to get, number one, win my company, second, win the region, and third, win the national? And I did that. And one of the things I did is, you know, you have to, you know, when you don't know how to do something, and one of the things we talk about on this show all the time is proximity is power. Find, you know, success leaves clues. Find the person who's achieved the outcome that you want, and you too could achieve that outcome. So that's what I did. I found the top demo person in our company, who was our sales trainer. His name was Matt. And I basically clung on the Matt every day. I mean, Matt came up, he lived in Greenville, South Carolina. He drove up about 3 times a week to see me in Charlotte. He would go out with me on sales calls, but also I sort of gleaned from him how to demo a copier. So every day we spent 2 to 3 hours after work practicing this demo, step by step, step by step. So when it came time to do my office Demorama, I won that office Demorama because clearly that was good, but I really wanted to win the company Demorama because that person would go on to the next step. And fortunately for me, Matt, he had to sort of play it across the board because everybody in the company sort of worked around. Of course, he was a sales trainer, so he worked with everybody. But by putting in that visual chain thinking, putting the steps I had to do day by day, and employing Matt, employing resources that I had to use, I won the office Demorama contest, which was a big deal for me. There was a financial, you know, side, which was maybe back then, I think it was maybe a couple $100, which back then was good money, but it wasn't going to make or break you. But what it allowed me to do, though, was get to the next step, the regional Demorama in the Southeast. And so we practiced, we went through the same strategy again, step by step, day by day. I would drive to Greenville some days. He would come up to Charlotte. And I put the same visual chain thinking strategy into that every single day. And how I did that is this. You know, one of the things I learned, you know, from Jim Rohn when I went to his seminar was, don't start your day until you plan your day. So every day before I would go to the next day, I still do this to every single day. I still do this as I plan my next day. So I knew exactly what I was going to do and saw the outcome and visualized that outcome every day. So every day I would plan 2 hours, 3 hours, drive to Greenville, drive back, whatever I had to do while I was still working to win this regional Demorama contest. And I won it down in Atlanta, Georgia, which was a big deal. It was a big deal. So now I'm the regional champion, and I'm going to go up for the national championship. Now you're up against the best of the best across the country. So once again, we did the exact same thing. We strategized, but I really had to be perfect. But you learn, that there's no such thing as perfection. It's all about making progress. Change is inevitable. Progress is not. What Tony Robbins teaches is about making progress. And we were making progress every day. And when I got to the national Demorama contest, I finished second in the country that year, which to me was not what I wanted, but was a great accomplishment because it proved to me what Bill first showed me. And I learned from going to these different seminars is if you can visualize that outcome and break it down and visualize every day and plan it every day and execute it every day, you can achieve your outcome. And that's what visual chain thinking is. One of the things I talk about, and once again, Bill taught me this, back when I was very young, is that faith invested with your actions turns whatever that imagination, whatever your outcome is, into reality. So it takes a couple of different things. You got to have desire, you got to have faith, but you have to invest that in taking action. And that's what I did every single day to win this Demorama contest and get to be second in the country. So visual chain thinking was a strategy that I used from day one when I was in sales to not only become a top salesperson in what I did in copier sales for that organization, but when I moved to technology sales in my next venture. And fortunately for me, I had somebody at that company who basically believed in one of the first tenets that Bill taught me is invest more in yourself than in your company. His name was Gordon Lane. And Gordon believed in that strategy, but no one in his organization was doing it until I came to him and begged him to give me some time off so I could go to some of these seminars to be, with Tom Hopkins and Jim Rohn and Dennis Waitley and being around these people so I could not only get the energy, but learn these strategies to become a top producer. Because I think what Gordon knew and what is ultimately correct, and what Jim Rohn teaches and Tony Robbins teaches is you get that you invest more in yourself than in your job, and your job will explode. It's exactly what happened for me. Is I started investing my faith into those actions in personal development, investing into myself more, and I turned that dream of being a top producer into a reality. So every month we had a sales contest. I was winning those sales contests consistently. I was winning the regional contest. And in about 2 to 3 years, I became one of the top producers in that company and being on the board of directors. So as you're going about this week, one of the first things I want you to start thinking about is visual chain thinking, putting your goals down. And what I do is I put them down on a piece of graph paper. And I put the goals on the left side on the graph paper, and across the top, I put the timelines, and I break it down pretty much every day, every day of every month. So I know pretty much every day, if I want to spend 10 minutes today on this area to improve on this area, it's what I do. And that's how I plan each day through visual chain thinking. So when we come back on Moments Matter, I'm going to now break down a little bit more detail about not only visual chain thinking, but how to really put the discipline into it. So you can not only create your own flight plan, but also soar with those eagles. We'll be back in just a couple of minutes on Moments Matter with Dave Sanderson.
Before we continue on with the show, I want to ask you a question. What if you could make your next year in business better than the last 10 combined? Sounds great, right? This is no gimmick or trick. It's the 3CI Leadership Mindset Series, the first and only servant leadership coaching program designed for C-suite executives, business owners, and leaders. Guided by 6 all-star leadership industry experts, the 3CI Leadership Mindset Series program is a year-long, done-for-you servant leadership program that will show you how to leverage the power of servant leadership to optimize business growth and exceed your organization's goals, making your next year in business better than the last 10 years combined. Guaranteed. You can learn more and download our free Servant Leadership Program resource guide by visiting leadershipmindsetseries.com or by calling me directly at 770-691-1102. Again, that's leadershipmindsetseries.com.
And we're back on Moments Matter. And I just went through my initial strategy when I moved from restaurant management to sales, of what something that Bill taught me that he got back in the 1920s from his mentor, and what I heard from by going to Jim Rohn and Tom Hopkins and Tony Robbins seminars is about visual chain thinking, and how to really put yourself in that mindset of how to visualize each step to that outcome and breaking it down so you can achieve the outcome and make sure it happens for you on a consistent basis. But now I want to sort of talk about how do you do that? Because like I mentioned, one of the things that I found this summer, which my chills going up my spine when I found these notes from Bill from 1997 that he got back in the 1920s, is these 12 principles. And I'm really excited. I'm going to be able to share these principles with some very selective people who really want to not only need it, but really deserve to know it. And so I can pass it on. Because one of the commitments I made to Bill the last time I saw them, and he asked me to make sure that these did not die with me, that they be passed on. So we're going to be passing those, but I want to sort of give you some perspective on some of these sort of strategies that he shared with me, so you understand the power of what this is. Because this goes back, once again, this is timeless information. I'm not the one coming up with this. People back in the 1800s were doing these things, becoming successful people. All I'm doing is doing what I just talked about, putting faith into action. Putting faith that these actions that I take will get the outcomes that I'm striving for, to be able to add value to more people than I can add to myself. So I really want to talk about now the key thing around everything that I talk about Moments Matter is you got to put discipline into everything that you do. Those who put discipline in each one of the areas of their life will get the outcome. And candidly, I've seen that over and over. And I really saw that the first time visually in my mind, and which really ingrained in me, was after I went to my first Tony Robbins seminar. And it was called Date with Destiny. This is back in 1994. And it was an amazing event. It was back then, he only had like 300, 400 people at the event. And now he has 2,500 to 5,000 people. It's amazing what Tony's done. And I've seen it and been around that energy so long, it just sort of gets ingrained into you. But one of the things that I did that day is I put my mission statement out. Now, back then, a mission statement was a pretty new concept. And candidly, that's when Stephen Covey was coming out with it, and all the great leaders were doing it. But it was sort of started trickling out in the public when Stephen Covey started writing that in the 7 Habits by building your mission statement. And I built this mission statement out. And I started doing it every single day. I started focusing in on it. And I wasn't getting results quickly. And I really was getting frustrated with myself. But what I did, though, is I put discipline into that mission statement, which is still my mission statement today. If you've heard me speak, you've heard me talk about my mission statement, which, God's delays are not God's denials. What I wrote in 1994 really didn't come into fruition until 2009. And we'll talk about that at a later date. But what I did, though, is I put discipline into it starting in 1994. To the point where that year, not only was I a top producer and got recognition in the company that I was with, but I lost, 25 pounds. I was getting healthy again. My finances were in pretty good shape. We were having our second child. Things were going really, really well. As I look back through my career, when I've taken great leaps is when I put discipline in. And when I've done these things, I go back and go back through and do the actions and do the strategies that Bill and all these people have taught me. So when I start making massive progress in my mind and in my actions, because it's all about the mindset. But discipline, there's really 3 steps to discipline. And really, it really has helped me when I focus on this, it helps me stay mindset on exactly the outcome. Number 1 is, putting discipline into something is never the easiest option. What do I mean by that? Well, most people go through lives, majoring in minor things, as Jim Rohn and Tony Robbins says. They major in minor things. And I've done the same thing. And candidly, recently I've done the same things. I putting a lot of time and effort in things that don't make a lot of difference instead of putting discipline into those big things. Because discipline, first thing in discipline, is never the easiest option. No one wants to put discipline into their health, into their finances, into their family, into their relationships. I mean, it's to the point where if you don't put discipline in each one of the key areas of your life, you never have that perfect circle of your life. You have the life's wheel, right? When you talk about all these different aspects of your life, there's usually a little chunk in one of them. Whether, right now you may be in in the fall of your finances and you're doing great, but all of a sudden your relationships are in your winter. You have a little chink in the winter, and you may be in spring when it comes to your health. So what the goal is, of course, is to have a perfect circle, perfect wheel where everything is hitting on all cycles, but that's not what life's all about. So the quickest thing to do is focus on discipline on those key areas. And it's never the easiest option. Who wants to go out and run 13 miles a day to train for a marathon in the winter and when it's raining and things like that? No one wants to do it. But you see that we just had the New York City Marathon yesterday. And I know a lot of people who ran it. I had a goal of running it. I never did. I ran local marathons here where I live. I never ran the big one up in New York City. But think of the discipline it has to take. It's not the easiest option, number one. Number two, you have to make it a full-time activity. See, discipline is not about doing a little bit now and maybe doing a little bit later on this week. It's about every day doing those disciplined things. We go back to what I talked about first, about don't start the day until you have a plan for your day. When I don't plan for the day is when I'm going off on very thing of people get in my head and people start coming at me. And sometimes I can't juggle it all. And, I have to put myself around people who are going to protect my time and put borders around my time, because I've got to be able to put discipline in each day. And so when I don't plan my day, and I've done that here in the last year or so, some days I don't plan it, is when my day goes sideways and I don't accomplish the outcomes. So the second thing is you got to make it a full-time activity. Every day now I put discipline in each area where I get up every day in the first hour and 30 minutes of my time. I go out and work out an hour and a half every day. The first thing, because I want to get it done. I want to get the energy going, and I put discipline in that. So I've lost a lot of weight, and I'm getting my health back, my blood pressure's back. All these things start coming together, because as we talked about, it's about those multiple aspects that get you when you start putting discipline to something. Same thing with my finances. I one of the things I learned being an entrepreneur, moving from a corporate life, was I thought I could handle all the aspects of that, but one of the things I didn't realize is you had to have the administration behind you. So I got myself out of discipline when it came to my finances because I didn't have the administration. I didn't put the discipline into the business. And now we're putting the discipline into the business. So now we're getting better results and being able to serve more people on a higher level. So every aspect of your life, the relationships, which is probably the most painful part of anybody's life. Most people's pain doesn't come because they don't have the money or something happens in their job. It's because the relationships with the people they care about the most are not the way they need to have them. They build up expectations and they can't meet the expectations. And that happened to me and my wife, where after the plane crash, after the Miracle on the Hudson, things were going to 15,000 miles an hour, and I was going 15,000 miles an hour and she was not. So we had a gap. And I had to figure out the strategy on how to do that. And the way I did that, I put discipline to the communication I had with my wife. And I used a strategy that I teach about in one of my workshops called sensory acuity, where I really learned the best way to communicate with my wife, where there's really three primary ways to communicate: through a visual way, which is very, people see things and quickly get it; through an audio way, where people want to talk and need to talk it out and get the detail out through audio; or through kinesthetically, through just being sort of around it and feel the energy around it. My wife is an auditory learner and communicator. She needs to hear it. She needs to immerse in that. She needs time to do it. Where, as you can tell if you're watching me today on Facebook Live or hearing me on the show, I'm a visual talker, visual communicator. I talk about things in general concepts. I talk quickly. And when I realized is when we were having our challenges and I didn't put discipline into my relationship, is when we started having differences of opinion and things were not really going really well. But I realized this one fact, that my wife wants to be heard and she wants to speak and me to communicate auditorily, not visually. Well, she may talk to me and I get something within 30 seconds. And before I would say, fine, I got it. I don't need 30 minutes to just tell me about it. Now I let her tell me about it. And all of a sudden it's changed my relationship. I put discipline in that relationship and I do it every single day. And the third thing about discipline, which is probably the greatest thing about discipline, is for every discipline effort you put in, you get multiple rewards. And I talked about this back in 2004 when I went to my first Tony Robbins seminar, right? I put discipline in each one of these areas, and all of a sudden I became a top producer. I was losing weight. My relationships were going great. We're making decent money. And all of a sudden I had multiple rewards by just putting discipline into my life. So I think number one, as you start thinking about putting your goals, your visual chain thinking, one of the things you have to do is first, you got to make it a full-time commitment. You have to put discipline in it every day. It's not some of the things you put down. It's not going to be the easiest way to get something done, but you have to do them. But also when in the end of that, when you see that rainbow at the end, you get multiple rewards. It's a fantastic approach to take. And these are some of the things that Bill was teaching me back when I was in my in the 20s. What he learned when he was in his late 20s from his mentor likewise. And the whole first two sort of strategies that Bill gave me back then was, number one, you got to work harder on yourself than on your job. And second thing, and probably the primary thing, is taking personal responsibility. And there's a lot of things that that's one of the things I see people today are challenged with. A lot of people will not take personal responsibility. And candidly, I've had that situation in my past where a lot of times I wouldn't take personal responsibility. And those are the times when I got myself in trouble, candidly. I was trying to figure things out, and, I was always, it's because of the environment, or, hey, 2009 is a bad year, so I shouldn't be selling anything this year. And I was blaming everybody else instead of blaming and taking personal responsibility. But once I started taking personal responsibility for every action that I do, personal, business, health, relationship, whatever it is, all of a sudden my credibility started going up, and people started coming into my life that I would never have had the opportunity to be around. Those first two lessons that Bill taught me, personal responsibility and investing yourself in personal development, are two of the key things that's changed my life. And I learned back in the 1980s. And fortunately for me, I found those notes and started looking through those notes again and reading through those notes again and going back through my notes of all these seminars I did and start ingraining them again. And that's why I think what we're doing now is impacting so many people's lives. This is how I got to show Moments Matter. That's how we came up with the book, Moments Matter. Because all of a sudden I started realizing is all these moments in our lives that we don't think mean anything in our lives. Each moment has a reason and a purpose, and it will serve you. And once you start realizing that in your life and taking personal responsibility for every moment in your life, all of a sudden you'll see the way things grow in your life. Things will change. You'll grow your relationships. You'll all of a sudden you stop focusing on your own personal significance. It's not about you. You start putting focus on how you can add value to other people first. And all of a sudden those relationships start blooming. Second thing is your careers, where, I worked for a company for 30 plus years. I've worked with about 4 or 5 different companies over 30 plus years in sales. I loved pretty much every one of them. I served every one of them. I learned a lot from every one of them. But what I've realized is I had to start really doing it for myself. And that came from a discussion I had in Chicago when I was security director for Tony Robbins. And we had a discussion about this. And he told me, he says, time to go out, time to do your own thing, time to take your own step. You can, because you'll never be truly free in your life until you free up your time. And then, all of a sudden I start thinking and focus on time, because now I'm getting into my late 40s, early 50s. Time is becoming very, very important. When you're young, you have all the time in the world. You're Superman. You can get anything done in any amount of time you want. But the older you get, the time starts compressing in. And that's why I love talking about the power of time, planning your day and being focused and disciplined, because one thing we all have in common is the power of time. Have you heard this, right? What do Bill Gates and me and you all have in common? We all have the same amount of time in a day. It's about what we do in that time of that day and the discipline we put in that time of day that makes all the difference in the world. So, that's when things started really changing for me and why I made the move that I did. I loved my company. I loved the people that I work with, but I wasn't going to be free until I freed up my time. But then all of a sudden you have to put discipline towards yourself. And that's a whole different world. So one of the things that I did, and one of the things that I learned once again from Bill back in the early days, where I really wasn't doing it back then, but one of the things he talked about is shaking up the routine. And candidly, I didn't understand what that meant. And I started looking through these notes this summer. I'm like, shake up the routine. What does that mean? It's like, you got to do something different. If you want to be something different, you got to act differently. You got to be around people who are different. You got to be able to put yourself in situations that you may be uncomfortable. Whatever is normal, just do the opposite. So that's what you see what I'm doing now. I'm trying to do the opposite of what most people do. Like on this show with Moments Matter, I like to get people who've accomplished something. I want people to understand it's not a solid a Paul kind of thing. It's like an overnight thing. It's consistency in what you do, but discipline. But pretty much everybody you've heard on my show this year is all of a sudden some moment in their life has shaken up something. Has done something different. Talk about Val Condos, the UCLA women's gymnastics coach who won 7 national championships. I've known Val for a couple of years now, and I had her on the show earlier. And what she did is an amazing thing about shaking up her routine, because she wasn't a gymnast. She never was a gymnast. She just knew nothing about gymnastics. But she was thrust in this opportunity to be the head women's gymnastics coach at UCLA. And they weren't very good back then. But what did she do? She shook it up. And how did she shake it up? Well, one thing she did is she put herself around great people. And one of the great people she put herself around was John Wooden, one of the greatest, if not the greatest college basketball coach ever. And his principles, and she got around him, and he basically helped her shake things up in her mind on how she approached coaching, because she didn't know anything much about gymnastics, but she knew about how to really interact with young women. So he took her under his wing, just like Bill took me under his wing. And all of a sudden, she started implementing these strategies that John Wooden taught her to win 7 national championships. But now, in her new book, is sharing those strategies likewise on, don't wait to dance. Do it right now. Take action right now. So that's what I hope you're getting from Moments Matter. Shake up the routine. Whatever's normal to most people, just do the opposite, because those are the people that will stand out. What do you think outstanding means? Is standing out from everybody else. That's why there's a difference between excellence and outstanding. And that's what Tony Robbins taught me, is that, people talk about excellence all the time. They want to be excellent. You go, especially like when I had the opportunity to interact with people in Germany, they talk about they want to be excellent and build on excellence. And like I learned is that's great, but it's really about standing out, that top 1%. And how do you do that? You got to shake up the routine. You got to do whatever's normal and flip it on its head. So when we come back on Moments Matter, we're going to talk about how do you flip it on its head and do what is normal, and take what's normal and do the opposite to get the outcomes that you want. We'll be back in a few seconds on Moments Matter with Dave Sanderson.
The 3CI Leadership Mindset Series is the first and only servant leadership coaching program designed to help business leaders around the world to build a happier, more productive business with a better bottom line. How? By serving others first. Guided by 6 all-star leadership industry experts, this program is a year-long, done-for-you servant leadership program that will show you how to leverage the power of servant leadership to optimize business growth and exceed your organization's goals, making your next year in business better than the last 10 years combined. Guaranteed. You can learn more and download our free servant leadership resource guide by visiting leadershipmindsetseries.com or by calling me directly at 770-691-1102. Again, that's leadershipmindsetseries.com.
Hey, we're back with Dave Sanderson on Moments Matter. We were just talking about one of the second things that Bill taught me about shaking up the routine. Whatever's normal, do the opposite. Let's talk about that for a second, because one of the things that Bill taught me, one of the strategies that he used, and I'm really some of the top people that I've been around all use this strategy, is having what's called a briefing book on each person. Now, what does that mean? Well, he gave me a sort of a background on it when he started doing this. He started doing this back in the late 1950s and early 1960s. And it was 20 years or so after he started building his empire of these movie theaters and what he was doing. But what he learned, he said, from President John Kennedy. He said one of the things that Kennedy did, especially after the Bay of Pigs, and it did not go well. If you know history, which I love history, if you ever heard me talk, I talk about history a lot, is that the Bay of Pigs didn't go well. President Kennedy did not execute. He didn't plan well. He did not do the things that he needed to do. And therefore he got exposed. And therefore he looked like he was inadequate or incapable of doing the job of being president. But one of the things that each president had then and still has, but he started employing, that Bill taught me, shared with me, was that he had a briefing book on pretty much every person that he ever interacted with. And in the White House and probably before, but he says about the White House. And he said that was what helped, one of the things that he learned about Kennedy that really started opening his mind up. If he could do the same thing in his business and have a briefing book on pretty much everybody he was interacting with, therefore he could also not only understand the driving force behind everybody's outcomes, he could figure out how he could add value and also win. And what is a briefing book? And it's a pretty simple thing. And I do it every day myself now. I've got a briefing book. If you look at my book right here, I got a briefing book on pretty much everybody I talk to. And all it is taking the notes and background information of people that I talk with or will be interacting with. So I have the background, the knowledge, and what's the driving force, so I can talk to that driving force. So I can not only build rapport quickly, but now become a trusted advisor. And that's what Bill started doing back in the early 1960s, and how he built his empire to the point where it was an unbelievable legacy for his family. It's one of the things that I'm focused on now, is building a legacy, not only for my family, for the people who follow behind me. So what I did back when I first got into technology sales, when I would interact with somebody, first I was just taking notes and make sure I understood what the comments were and what I talked about, so I was consistent with integrity of the conversation. So when I talked to somebody, I wasn't talking out of turn. That was very important, because sometimes people in sales, and I've probably been guilty of this likewise, sometimes I talk out of turn and therefore I'm not consistent. So I started doing that, and that really helped me build credibility. But when I started really building a briefing book around what I was doing, especially my last sales position, I would do the background. And nowadays it's much easier to do the background. You can go to LinkedIn right now, or go out on Wikipedia and WikiLeaks and whatever you want to get, and get the information. So I was writing bios pretty much on everybody that I was going to interact with. And I would also talk to their assistants or somebody around them, so I understood what kind of sort of modality they communicated in. So before I would have a meeting, I would understand the driving force behind that person. I knew that person went to college. I knew what that person's history was. And I tried to understand before I got in. Sometimes I had to wait till I got in, but I could quickly understand what modality they were in. So I could either speak visually, auditorily, or kinesthetically, build credibility quickly, and all of a sudden become a trusted advisor. So I was sitting in the C-suites while other people were dealing with other levels of people. And my company really, sometimes didn't really understand how I was doing this. And this is the strategy. One of the strategies I use is I had a briefing book on all the important people in my business. So I had a client that I was working with in 2009 when the plane crash happened. And I did a briefing book on every important person in that company. So when I was traveling with him, we were talking on many different levels. We were just talking about software. We were talking about many different levels. And all of a sudden, when the plane hit, I was basically one of their family. They took me under their wing. They acted like I was part of their company. So when things got tough, and things do get tough in business relationships, as we all know, when stuff hits the fan at 2:00 in the morning, you may have heard that phone about, back in the last election, right? Who's going to be at the phone at 2:00 in the morning when that phone call comes? Well, I was taking that phone call at 2:00 in the morning when stuff hit the fan. So I was a trusted advisor. So when things got tough, I was a part of the family, so they would never, ever go away from me because I was part of the family. And I did this with every client that I had in my last company, which helped me build a tremendous relationship and business career, becoming a top producer in that organization, in that company. And I think that's one of the things that distinguished me from other people. Yes, some other people were getting outstanding sales and they were doing a great job. Building a briefing book for each person made the difference for me in business. Now, I also did that in my personal life. I have one on each one of my members of my family, each one of my team members that are part of my team. So I know exactly not only what I've talked about, but their background, what's important to them. So if you talk to my team members right now, especially, they'll tell you that I probably know as much about them personally as I know about them on the business level. So when times get tough again, when we have to have tough discussions, then we have to take actions, and we got to invest in something versus something else. We can make those in tandem and in sync instead of being adversarial, which helps get the outcomes much faster than what you need. So number one of the first strategies that I did, and I do now every single time, to take that next step, build on that through the discipline of having a briefing book for everybody, important person I deal with. Because one of the questions Bill asked me, and this was probably 1995, 1996. This is when he was towards the end of his career, end of his sort of going to pass on to the next level. And I think he was in his sort of a spiritual stage at that point in time, because it was more of a spiritual conversation. He said, if an opportunity knocked on your door today, Dave, are you the kind of person that would be invited in? And that was a great question. I really had to think about that, because there are times in my life where I would say, yeah, probably so. I'm probably a pretty good guy. But there are probably other times when people say I was such a hard driver that I would probably be invited in. And maybe that's one of the reasons I wasn't growing the way I wanted to. I was growing in certain ways, but I wasn't growing in a holistic way. Because he said, if an opportunity knocks at your door, Dave, are you the kind of person that would be invited in? So ask yourself this question. If something came your way, if an opportunity came your way, whether it's a business opportunity, a personal opportunity, a growth opportunity, a relationship opportunity, whatever that may be, are you the kind of person who would be invited in? And it doesn't mean, the actions, is like deep down, say, what are those values that you have that would be invited in? Are you accountable? Are you trustworthy? Do you have integrity? Are you focused more on personal significance or somebody else's significance? And that was one of the greatest questions Bill asked me in his latter stages of his life and our relationship. Because once I start focusing on that question, I want to be that kind of person, opportunities start opening up. And that's what happened after the Miracle on the Hudson in 2009. I started really focusing on that. Some things come my way, because I'm in a different place now. I've gone through a life-changing experience, and I've survived a plane crash, and the opportunities are coming my way. Was I really that kind of person that that I should be involved with this? And there were times when I would say probably no. I was so still driven because I still had my business career. I was asked to speak. I was doing a lot of media events. Oh, by the way, I still have my family. Oh, by the way, I'm still working with my friends and my mentor, Tony Robbins. There's a lot of things. So I was really stretched a different way. I wasn't putting discipline in initially. But once I started putting discipline in this, what kind of person do I need to be invited in? That made all the difference in the world, to the point where I was invited to be at the Supreme Court. And I've gone to places around the world that I never would have ever had the opportunity, because all of a sudden I started focusing on the kind of person that I would want to be invited into these opportunities. So when opportunity knocks on my door now, hopefully I'm the kind of person that they say, you know what, we want you to be a part of our team. And that's how I became a part of a team with Don Barden and Dominique Wilkins and Steve Nedovic and Brittany Tucker down at LMS, at Leadership Mindset Series in Atlanta. What we're doing is because I wanted to be that kind of person who could be a servant leader mindset and teach the strategies on servant leadership from personal leadership strategies. So that's why I'm very fortunate to be involved with LMS. And you've heard some of the commercials you've listened to Moments Matter, but that's very important to me. And we're going to be rolling our 2019 program out, starting in Waterloo, Ontario, and in Toronto, because we really want to take this mindset of servant leadership and really expand upon it in 2019. Because one of the things that we're finding is people, especially folks in the Gen Y, Gen X, and millennial stages of their life, they want to be leaders, but they don't understand what it takes to be a leader. They understand it comes from the heart, the mindset, it comes from the heart. Being a servant leader first, well, all of a sudden I start elevating you. What Bill taught me, when I talk about, one of the first things I tell people about Bill is he taught me is you put yourself around the peer group that you want to be like, and they will elevate you to that standard. So just by doing this one thing, ask your question, if an opportunity knocks on your door today, are you the kind of person that would be invited in? That shook up my whole routine and the way my mindset is. And that changed everything in the direction of my life. And it all started back in 1986 when I first met Bill, and he introduced me to all these different concepts, which I'm going to be really excited to invite some people to be with me on a 1-year journey so I can teach them what Bill taught me over a year's process and take them from where they want to be to give them those strategies that are timeless to help them not only grow emotionally, but financially, spiritually, physically. So they're all of a sudden become the person. So when that opportunity knocks on their door, they will be invited in. It's been a tremendous hour today. And Kayla, if you're on, on your own Facebook Live. I'd really appreciate you checking this out, because this is the first time we've done a Facebook Live. So please give us some comments back. I usually have a guest on, but today I really want to take the time to start talking about some of these things that Bill taught me. And my other mentors like Tom Hopkins and Jim Rohn and Tony Robbins and Dennis Waitley and Earl Nightingale. Because one of the things that you can tell by what I've talked about is I've taken action on everything that I pretty much learned back then, and now re-implementing it right now, so I can be that kind of person when opportunity knocks. I can walk in. If you have any questions, thoughts, or comments, please just let us know. I'd love to take them on and sort of help you get to where you need to be. Because one of the things we're really focused on right now is one of the driving questions in my mind, in my focus for the company, is how can we impact somebody every day? That's why we started this group Impact. I really didn't understand why or if I was really going to do it, but it goes back to something that one of the things was getting back to when I was with Bill, and it was one of the first lessons Bill taught me. And I'll end the show with a little bit of this last story. So one of the things that when I was with Bill, it was a week before Christmas, maybe 10 days before Christmas, and I was at the restaurant. And Bill came in to have his coffee and his ice cream. He'd do that every day. We'd have our little one-on-one chats, and when he would come by, and he said, "Hey, come on out. I want to show you what I got for Bonnie for Christmas." Bonnie was his wife. And so I went out and he bought her a blue Corvette, a beautiful blue Corvette. I had never seen a brand new Corvette in my life. It was very cool. And he said, "Jump in." I said, "That's cool. I've never been inside a Corvette." So he said, "We're going to take a spin." So he said, "But make sure you point it in the right direction, because as soon as you touch that pedal, man, that thing's going to take off." So we got out of the parking lot. I pointed right there. This thing took off. A beautiful ride. We get back in the parking lot. I had to get back into the restaurant. He said, "Listen," he said, "Dave, you need one of these." Now, you got to remember, this is 1987. I was making $13,000, $15,000 a year. I was making nothing, and I could barely afford my rent. And Bill saying, "I need one of these." And I was like, "Look at that, Bill, I can't afford it." Right. And he gave me his first life lesson. And this goes back to what we're talking about, this visual chain thinking. This visual chain thinking started building in my mind. He said, don't think about wages, think about profits, because profits always come before wages. He said, you say you have that wage mindset, you'll always be a wage earner and you'll never build a fortune. He said, you guys start thinking about profits first. And all of a sudden I'm thinking, well, how do you do that? And he started teaching me those lessons. This is how he started teaching me these lessons about building these goals through visual chain thinking and these different strategies about putting yourself around the peer group, and these different lessons about, affirmations and putting yourself every day in that mindset. So when you have the opportunity, so I guess the big lesson today is this: when you have the opportunity, you're around somebody who's done something outstanding, take that opportunity. Last year or 2 years ago, I had that opportunity to meet someone, a very outstanding person in Toronto. I was invited to go to Toronto, but it was the middle of the week, and I was like, do I have the time to do it? Do I have the money to do it? And also I started thinking about that lesson from Tony taught me about when he had the same mindset, when he was doing pretty well. And Pat Riley and some of the people he was hanging with said, "You got to take this trip over to Southeast Asia with us for 10 days. We're going to fly a private jet. We're going to do all these fun things. You got to do this. It's going to cost X number of thousands of dollars." And Tony's like, "I can't afford that. Plus, I don't have the time." But you start thinking, if I don't do that, what's it going to cost me? That's one of the reasons I ask everybody on the show, what is something you've done that you haven't done that's cost you something in your life? Because if he hadn't taken that one trip and spent those thousands of dollars and been around these people, he said for the first few days he was miserable. You probably heard his tell his story. He was miserable. But all of a sudden he learned more things and built more connections and more networks on that trip, which helped him explode into his infomercial stage and building his different product sets and impacting people and meeting with Princess Diana. It's amazing. So I guess the whole lesson is this: put yourself around the peer group you want to be like. Put visual-based thinking into your mind. Look at the big picture as you're thinking out, and make sure every day do something. Take discipline every day, and you too can be the person who will be invited in when they're asked and the door knocks. So I want to take a quick moment and say thank you again for listening in today. And I wanted to invite you to be a part of something. I'm excited to share this wonderful opportunity with all of you all. My new leadership development course called Cultivating Personal Leadership is now accepting new students. And now you can compress the years it takes to accomplish your goals into days. Just visit cultivatingpersonalleadership.com and use the code Moments Matter, and you'll get an additional 15% off. Remember, this week, create your own flight plan for your future. Make all the moments in your life matter. Start focusing in on visual-based thinking, building getting your outcome and building the plan out and visually every day seeing it come to fruition. And you too will be, when the opportunity knocks, you will be invited in. Until next week, this is Dave Sanderson on Moments Matter.
Thank you